And it's preparing to stream.
That's one of my photos. I thought I may as well do all my photo backgrounds.
So I think we should get in the habit of coming in on the punchline of a joke.
No, that's usually when Gregory enters the room.
All right. We are all...
he is my punchline.
Just a little giddy, but there we are. And we are, in fact...
I'm just yes, no,
yes,
no.
Are we live?
No,
Are we Memorex?
Yes, no,
we are live.
Yes, no. Hang on. Which way were we supposed to be going again?
We're all live. Simone is Memorex, so
Yeah.
Let's just keep that.
It's all a question of who is Memorex and who is live.
Yes.
Anyway, let's introduce ourselves, starting from Simone.
From me? Why me? Why do I have to go first? Seriously, I want someone else to go first. Then I know it's
a beautiful background. That's why.
Yeah, okay. All right. Well, I can do that then. I don't mind at all. Look, if you want the official story, just read my LinkedIn profile. Seriously, that's the snapshot. That's the best way to do things. If you want the other version, then we can talk about that. Yeah, 20 plus years, been doing lots of cool stuff, came in from the business side, really love all my organizational change and stuff like that. Am an absolute fan of mixing frameworks. That's why I'm called the mixologist, because I like to come up with all sorts of interesting cocktails to suit the context of the client, and considers myself, I guess, like a human appy. We all know what an appy does. Well, I like to do the human side of that. Let's connect.
Well done.
Wow. I'd like to get to know that person.
Yeah, after all this time, you still haven't got it yet?
No, I got it. I got it.
Simone, you have to choose who goes next.
Yeah.
Oh, well, Gregory.
Great.
You spoke.
Hi, I'm Greg or something. I am into this IT thing for many, many decades. Come up the ranks most recently, sat in the C-suite as a CIO of a state agency in the fine state of Oregon. I've now moved on to even more strategic patterns. But one of the things that I've learned that has made these conversations really important is the further up in the organization that you go, which is actually further down, the more you realize that it's about people, it's about relationships, and it's about the culture that we as leaders help create. I've written books on service management. I'm known for my work in IT change management. But what I think I'm the most proud of is the people that I've worked with and the people that I've helped empower and encourage and uplift to pursue their what I would call excellence. And with that, we're going to turn it to Patty for the final answer.
Well, officially 20 years in business. I worked in a large international firm globally, had the opportunity to travel because of that, which was really exciting. But I started in IT and I worked up from a systems technologist to the point where I was in a leadership position, and really took a leap about 12 years ago because that whole human side, the people side, and that connection between humans and technology was not being done well. And I wanted to do it better and teach other people how to do it better. So that's kind of my story. Love being a great observer of humans and how they react and interact and take on these enablers we call technology.
Nice. And you're going to turn it over to
only
Roy.
One of us left.
Yes, yeah. Roy, sorry.
only one of us left. So I won't go too far back in the dim, dark, distant past, but basically what I do is I'm a writer and analyst for IT service management, IT technologies, customer service, customer experience, basically any place that technology and humans come together. So we have that in common, I think, all of us. And that's probably why we started having these conversations about a year and a half ago. This is informal. It's not intended to be a webinar, by the way, folks. It's just these conversations that we've been having we find fruitful, and some other folks have told us that when they listen in, they find them fruitful. So here we are, streaming live on YouTube, and thank you for observing. If you want to tweet comments and questions, by the way, there's you can use Twitter. Hashtag is KTLO Learn. KTLO Learn on Twitter. So we'd love to have
And
those
I've
questions
certainly
and comments.
got I've got mine open as well, so I can see any questions that
Yeah.
come through.
Good.
And please, by all means, join in the conversation that way, and let us know what's going on with you when we talk about certain things.
Absolutely. So today's topic is the fork in the road. And we certainly are at many forks and many roads these days because of some things that have gone on in the world. And it's an interesting thing to happen. I remember reading Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance for the first time many years ago, obviously when it was new back in the 70s. And Robert Pirsig talked about going down the road on the motorcycle and coming to a turnoff. And he said, when you see one turnoff to the right, and then a little while later, you see another turnoff to the right at a sharper angle, and another turnoff to the right at even a sharper angle than that, you know something is over there. And maybe there's something worth going over to visit and see. And I always thought that was really brilliant. So you look at this photo, and what goes through my mind is, okay, which way to go? Which way do I want to go? If I'm out walking or driving along on this country road, which way is the better way to go, if there is a better way? And what's there? And I think that's the question that we tend to ask ourselves. What's over there? What's worth going to see? What will I see when I get there? So maybe let's talk about that a little bit. What do we see when we make this choice and we choose one fork or the other? What happens?
You know, as you were talking about that, turning right, all I could actually see myself was coming back in on myself again and recrossing a path I may have crossed once before. And I thought it was quite interesting because sometimes when you said an even sharper angle and an even sharper angle again, so I'm not really ending up back where I was. I just seem to be, sometimes we recross certain paths or we meet up again with something that we'd seen or done, and we're going, oh, that's like the deja vu moment. Haven't I been here before?
So my thought on that, Simone, was exactly that. Is there's a sense in which I think we've known there was a fork in the road for a very long time for us individually, and I'm hoping we get to talk about what is that, because I think it's different for everybody. I don't think there is a road literally like, hey, IT people go down this road. I think it's more about me, my skills, my desires, my hopes, my ambitions, and all that sort of thing. But in a very real sense, I feel like if we come in the fork in the road and we don't face it, if we don't deal with it, we're destined to come back around and do it again. And I think one of the things about this virus thing that we're in right now is it's kind of both giving us the gift of time to be with ourselves inside of our own heads and process that, but two, gives us in some cases the physical requirement. You're going to have to choose left or right, and you don't know necessarily what's down there.
Well, see, I don't know about this just choosing left or right, because sometimes for me, I mean, if you've got a wide enough view, sometimes the fork in the road, sometimes both those roads actually leads to the same destination. It's just a different journey that you're taking to get there. See, for me, it's all been, the journey is like, okay, so I have an idea of a destination. I was once asked, it was when I was doing my holistic counseling training, and the teacher, this is such a long time ago now, but the teacher said to me, so you've got to pair up and then choose what your goals are and work out your steps of how you're going to get to the goal. What's your end goal? And during this conversation, and very well matched we ended up being, she's turned into a friend for life, actually. And my point was that I don't really have a specific end goal. I know how I would like to be. I know what I would like my life to be like, but not necessarily a specific goal. For me, The journey was the actual goal. I wanted to enjoy myself getting there. And I knew there were going to be tough bits and everything else. So for me, the journey is a bunch of adventures just strung together, you know, staying focused on the present while being able to understand the journey to the future. You know, how many people, it's so funny, how many of them read the end of a book and then first and then go back and read it from the beginning? I mean, I don't know how many people do that. I don't, because I like the journey in getting there.
I think there's a point in that, Simone, where the idea isn't that there's a right or wrong here. I think it's that that whatever fork you take, you've got to live it, but you've got to live it well, right?
Yes.
I think that, and we have to think about that organizationally as well, right? This is the week where I've been seeing in all kinds of places, whether it's on LinkedIn, social media, or in conversations I'm having with you know, clients who are struggling but don't necessarily have the capacity to bring anything on, any new projects on, whatever, because they're going through all of this. And they're all saying, we don't know what to do, we don't know what to do. But the thing is, like you said in the last session, Greg, you know what to do. You just have to take a step. You have to move forward, right? Yeah. And I think however you choose to move forward, it's how you approach the adventure. And I think the fork in the road for me is the intentional idea of, when I take that fork, who do I want to be? What does that look like in that journey? Yeah.
I think that's a really good point. And what's really interesting when you're standing at that fork as well, and very recently came across the quote by Dr. Cherry View and Rob England from their little small A Agile Manager book, but it comes from Cherry's background, and she says, well, so, you know, from several cultures, they consider the past to be in front of you and the future behind you, because you can see the past, and if that's in front of you, you can see the past and you can learn from it. But the future actually comes from behind us and flows over us. And I think that's a really, you know, taking that journey, we're sort of, what's that movement? As you just said, Patty, what is that intention of moving forward on this journey? And what's the energy and the rhythm that sits underneath that, which is what I think the intention is, that then picks us up and moves us forward.
So we had a quote from Robert Frost that two paths diverged. I think you have it, Roy. Yeah, there you go. Two roads diverged in a woods, and I took the one less traveled by, and that's made all the difference. I think it's interesting when he talked about the road less traveled, and we have all heard that in popular culture, but I've thought about that a lot. This has been one of those recurring themes in my life that I've thought about a lot, about taking the road less traveled by. And I have my own thoughts about that. But I think as humans, we tend to evaluate paths based on, what can I pick up from this? And if you go back to the path that we had the picture of, both of those paths appear to be about equally well trod. And so the paths themselves don't give us any clues. But when you see a road less traveled, there's a tendency to say, well, that one's probably the dangerous one, or leads to nowhere. And so we tend to be herd animals, and we follow the path more traveled. In other words, there's a certain sense in which we do what everybody else does, and therefore we experience the same thing, or generally the same thing that everyone else does, whereas the road less traveled has the opportunity to be something else. And so
I
for
think
me,
the one you said that, sorry, the one that I thought was the most traveled then, that's also that tendency we have to choose the path of least resistance.
absolutely.
Yeah, it's safe. It's safe, right? And it's about, a lot of us choose a safe road because it's a known road. It's understood by those around us. We don't feel like we'll be lost in the forest somewhere, right? Yeah.
This brings to mind another yogi quote, which is about somebody asked him about some restaurant or club or something, and Yogi said, "Oh, nobody goes there anymore. It's too crowded." And that's another. The man was absolutely brilliant beyond, without realizing any of it. And I think that's a very interesting consideration. As you were just saying, the herd goes one way.
Yeah.
Do we make a choice to go the other way? I've made those choices many times in my life that, okay, everybody's running in that direction. And it goes back to the way I dressed in college. I used to wear a jacket and tie or a suit. And people, when I went to college, didn't dress like that. They wore, rippy jeans and t-shirts. I make conscious decisions to be, not to follow the herd in a lot of cases. And in a lot of cases, what winds up happening is like, oh, there's no water hole here. That was a dumb move.
My mother used to say she never, ever, ever does what we want her to. So you don't have to worry about her getting sucked in to anything she doesn't want to do. She may, however, suck 10 or 20 other people into getting into something they shouldn't do.
Right.
Wow.
Hang on,
Yeah.
isn't that how we ended up doing this?
Yeah.
That's exactly how we ended up doing this. And if this is your first time seeing this, I'm sorry. No,
Yeah.
if this is the first time you're seeing this, you came here expecting a webinar.
Yeah.
Not
no,
so much.
No,
not
no.
really.
This is like, it's like wandering
Sorry.
into the middle of a
I
cocktail
need another
party.
drink after that one.
Yeah.
Speaking of cocktail parties,
Yes.
it's like wandering into the middle of a cocktail party and happening into a conversation. That's what we do. We just talk to each other and
Yeah.
try to make sense of what we're seeing and reading and so forth.
Now,
So
what you said is a really interesting thing, Roy, about, sort of taking the less traveled path. So, Gregory, what was one of your less traveled paths that you took?
Wow. You'd love to put me on the spot. So
Absolutely.
my
Always.
path in my career and it's going to be in my autobiography, which, by the way, I'm going to put this on record. My autobiography is called Wait, What? And it really epitomizes my path forward in life, because I followed my heart. I did what I wanted to do. I was curious. I was inquisitive. And I thankfully worked for a rather large organization that had a culture that said, sure, go down that path and see what happens. And that's how I got into system administration. I went from system administration into security. I went from there into network security. I went from there into enterprise network operations. I went from there into being a regional manager of network operations. I went from there to being a senior IT manager. And then somehow I failed so miserably that they made me a CIO and punished me severely for everything that I've done. That's supposed to be humorous, folks. And so I would say that the road less traveled by is I didn't plan a career. I'm there. I don't know if that surprises you. I pursued things that I found interesting or intriguing. And I found along the way that the thing that I got interested in a topic. And I worked for a company where literally, remember back when we all had O'Reilly books on our shelves? I worked with the people that wrote some of those books. And I'm like, oh, hi. Anyway, I have a stupid question. And they would hold these master's courses at their desk where I would just learn and I would soak it in. But the reason I think that they were willing to invest in me is I would go and digest it and come back with better questions and better questions. And so the road less traveled for me was to allow myself to say, well, what do I want to do? What am I interested in? What gets my attention? How about you, Simone? What's your road less traveled?
Oh, this is going to sound really weird, but I made the decision to join the army when I was 11. And a lot of people were like, yeah, I know. It's like, yeah, that looked at it. It's like, what? Here's all my school friends. And as the time went on, I kept checking on that choice, as you go through and get in the teenage thing and discover lots of other cool things to do. And the girlfriends wanted to say, oh, let's open up a hairdressers together, or let's do this, and who's doing uni, who's going to be the doctor, and da-da-da-da. And the thing is my choice back then was not a common one made by females. And I ended up being in the first female platoon in the Australian Army that threw live grenades in training and did a lot of the male training and stuff like that. So it was groundbreaking stuff. That was definitely a less traveled road.
I think for me it was more of a fall into things, similar to you, Greg, in that you get interested into something and all of a sudden you land in it, and depending on what you do and how well you do with it, the people around you say, hey, maybe you should think about this, or maybe we could talk you into this. And I really had no idea I would land in IT at all, but I was kind of geeky and building computers at home and playing around, and the organization I was working with just kind of lumped me over there because I got it. And I'm not going to tell you how many years ago that was, but I will say our Wi-Fi had a tower outside the building.
That's awesome.
Love it.
Yeah.
Wait, so how many here on the panel actually intended to go into IT? Show of hands. Yeah. Yeah.
Sort of, but not
I
till
know,
later.
Yeah.
that was, my love of technology started in the military. That's how I got into tech, in that, like, loving tech was from that perspective.
I was working in the school system, and they had a new set of technology outcomes across the province I live in. And somebody needed to help with the setup of the cabling of the school.
That's how
Boom.
they get you. They always get you like that. How about
I'll
you,
play
Roy?
possum while I'm in the roof. Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah. We need somebody to crawl in the rafters and run some Cat 5. So, Patty,
yeah.
you seem like you could do that.
You can fit through the hole, Patty.
Yeah, exactly.
We had a team.
Yeah,
We had a team, but it
the
was
only reason.
interesting.
Yeah.
Just whoever knew. So a friend of mine and I, whoever knew anything about computers was like lumped in charge, because these teachers are busy with kids. So let's do this. And yeah.
I think cabling in roof spaces and crawl spaces was one of the transferable skills I got from the army.
No kidding. Except when you're running cable, there's not a lot of bullets going 2 feet over your head.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. Yeah, it's just a little different, but yeah.
Roy, what was your
best thing for me as a systems tech was actually when the organization I was working for finally got the clamps that I could lift the floorboards properly.
Oh yeah. Roy, how about you? What was your path?
I'm sure this has happened to most of you who go out for a drive somewhere. Maybe you're on vacation and you decide to take a road that you're not familiar with, and you come around a corner and there's one of those yellow signs and the black line shows you where the road is, and it goes like that. That's me. I have done a lot of different things. I was seriously academic when I was younger, but also playing music, and went into that professionally for 20 years or a little bit more. But I had started out geeky techie when I was really young, and I decided that because tech was pouring into the music industry so heavily in the late 70s and early 1980s, I was fascinated by some of the things that we could do, and got back into electronic computing, and worked with other musicians to build databases and taught them how to use these things. And finally I decided, well, that's where I need to be, is over there. And so I made that turn in the road in the mid 90s, and have been immersed in the technology world since then, and various roles. But it certainly was not a straight path for me. It's a lot of zigzag. And,
have you done anything else other than
done anything,
IT?
Roy?
Other than IT?
Oh yeah, right.
Have I done what?
It's something I like to. Yeah. What's another job that you've done that hasn't been an IT job?
I was a loan officer in a bank. Yep. I was a manager of a supermarket. I was a customer service person behind a desk. I was in hospitality. I was. I worked a summer at building tunnels under the city of New York. Wow. So yeah, it's And every single thing that I've ever done, whether it was part-time or full-time or cover a summer between college semesters or whatever it was, I took away from that many things,
Yes.
all
Yes,
of which
and
have converged to
exactly.
be here now.
Yeah.
Exactly. I think that's part of that path, isn't it? Like we might have, you know, switched jobs and jumped around. Like I didn't go straight into IT just because I loved tech. You know, it was about how it applied to what I was doing, regardless of where I was. It was what could I do with it? How could I make life different? How could I make life better? You know, that was the joy of being around the tech.
Yeah, I think
making that
as
happen.
we talked over the last year and a half, really the passion that you see about the technology that we all have is its potential for humanity. And I think that's the one thing that we all have in common is that there is potential to really grow humanity by using these as enablers, right? To be able to better our businesses, better our lives, better, right?
So
Definitely.
when I was quite young, I'm going to admit this publicly. I was a amateur radio operator, ham radio operator, and
you're such a ham.
I know. And one of the things that ham radio does is it's fascinating because there's all the electronics, and to get your license, you have to pass exams about, you know, how in my day, vacuum tube worked, and then transistors and all that. And you had to copy and send Morse code, and it was quite an accomplishment. But at the end of the day, what is amateur radio? It's people communicating with people, either for the enjoyment of learning something. And one of the things, and now I'm going to date myself, which is fine, but I was communicating, because I'm on the West Coast, I was communicating with other ham radio operators in Russia behind the Iron Curtain, whereas in my country, we were under the impression as young people consuming what the messaging was, they were bad, they were evil. And what I learned was they're an awful lot like me. They're just fellow human beings doing what they do. And so my world became small at a very early age, you know, and I talk with people from all over the world eventually. But for me, the technology was interesting. It was the hook. I'm still kind of geeky in that regard. But it's the connection. It's how is the world different now because I'm able to talk to somebody in Russia using an international language like Morse code?
So here's the thing. Here's the commonality, and I think we've talked around it a little bit. But it seems to me that there's two ways to look at things. One is the thing for itself, or what Immanuel Kant called das Ding an sich, and that would be looking at a technology for a technology's sake. I don't think any of us here are that way. We're not looking at the world that way. We're looking at technology as a means to do something. I expressed it recently in an interview by looking at a way to get work done, looking at a way to communicate with people. That's how we look at the technology world. And that's, I think that's our common thread for all the things that we do and all the things that we've done.
Yeah. Well, that leads to, I'm so glad that you've got up this emotional pyramid of needs. It's quite an interesting thing. Suzanne David is actually one of my favorite people to follow. And she has a book called Emotional Agility. And she really is a leading thinker. She likes to push the boundaries around the thought patterns around emotional intelligence and what it might mean and how we apply it. And there is a lot more chatter now, if you look across the streams, around emotional intelligence because of people having to work remote, and how do we get the integration and the collaboration and all the interactive things that are needed from that perspective. And one of the key things, though, if you watch her TED Talks and stuff, there's some amazing things. And it also leads into the complementary medicine work and the training I've done in the Hawaiian systems about people. Because one of her talks, and she, being South African, but she introduces the Zulu word, sawubona. And it's the word for hello. But it's more than hello. What it actually means is I see you. And in seeing you, I bring you into being. And that resonates exactly with my Hawaiian training with aloha as well, because that is about the breath of life. And to its bones, what we're doing right now, we only have so many breaths given to us in our life. And so in choosing to share my breath, I want to think about, if I'm telling you something that is worthwhile, is it of value? And then you turn it back the other way as the listener, that when you say something to me, when you engage in a conversation with me, you are sharing your breath of life. So if you are only giving so many breaths, then that is an actual gift. So this whole thing about emotional intelligence really comes back to the core about what it means to be human beings interacting with each other.
It's the emotional intelligence isn't something I do, it's something I experience with another.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
So wow, apparently we're going to be touchy-feely today, because that really triggered me. Thanks, Simone. Because I think to myself, as I start realizing that the older you get, the more you realize that your energy, your life energy, if you will, I don't know what the right term is from a metaphysical or whatever standpoint, but I realize that I only have so much emotional, spiritual, physical energy. And so that's caused me to really start thinking in terms of, where do I want to invest that? How do I want to invest that energy? And especially in recent times, there's a lot of what we called noise earlier, a lot of messages. These people are stupid, these people are making mistakes, I don't like these kinds of people. And there's a lot of polarization of cultures and of peoples. And they're kind of bait. It's like, that's not right. And you start spending energy on something that has really actually no value. You can't change it, you can't influence it, you can't correct it. And so I find myself saying, is that something that I want to spend my energy on? And I'm not the victim of that. Just because that happened, or just because that came across my feed or came to my attention, I can say, yeah, as I like to say, put a little stupid flag on it and move on, right? Just like, okay, I don't need to spend my energy. But the idea is, where should I spend my energy? And I think that's one of the things, like over here, we can't go outside, but we can go inside. And so we start talking about those connections, and I'm finding that I miss people, and I want to have those kind of relationships. And we start really thinking about what is important. And technology has allowed time and space to not be such a limiting factor. So what does it mean that I could have a real-time relationship with somebody that lives in another country or another part of the world? And what could we do together to make the world better, or to invent something, or to make a contribution to the world? It's just like, it gets big very quickly, which brings us to the fork in the road is
exactly.
what am I going to do? Right.
So
I think part of the issue with the world in which we find ourselves these days, enabled by technology, is it's not so much we're driving along and we come to a fork in the road.
Right.
It is fork, 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 fork.
It's like going into a restaurant and the menu.
You'll get banned if you keep going like that.
Yeah.
Right, but it's like going into a restaurant. The menu's so big you can't choose any one thing, right? There are too many great options, right? But I think you really pegged into other people say that's your energy bank account, or your how are you going to spend that, right? And so spending that time, but with intention. So it isn't so much I know where I'm going, but I know who I want to be when I get there, and whatever road is going to get me to who I want to be, that's
the road you want to take.
Piece. Yeah.
I like the middle one here, in connection, because something, and we mentioned it in the last couple of episodes as well, that social distancing is not the same as emotional distancing. In fact, I didn't like the term social distancing, because we use social tools. So it's like, oh, I'm going to distance from social. It's not. We're just doing physical distancing. That's the only thing that we're doing. So, but I think this emotional distancing, it's, people are falling into that trap, because they're getting into their little bubbles. And this is a choice. This is one of the forks in the road, is actually choosing to, well, we used to say hearing is a physical faculty, right? Listening is a psychological choice.
I think it's interesting when you say that, because stepping outside of your zone and thinking of the world around you differently. For instance, yes, I miss people too, Greg. I'm missing grandchildren in another city. And yet the other night, I read them a book regardless, right? I
Yes,
read them a book
because we
online.
can.
And the
Yeah.
coolest thing about it is they had the same copy of the book in their hands that I had in mine, and we kept showing each other the pictures and are you on the right page? And so I think that's just a small metaphor for what we can choose when we're talking about this fork in the road. We have to think about our actions slightly differently. Can I have a cup of coffee over Skype or one of those other tools, right?
Yeah.
Yes, you can.
Yes. Well.
Yes.
Or one.
So this feels like the opportunity. This feels like the opportunity to talk about one of the. I told you I've pondered this. Two roads diverged for very many decades. Because it just seems to connect with me or resonate with me. And my answer, because we don't know, and Roy talked about that, we go down the road and we might find that this isn't what I thought it was, or I didn't expect that, or there's the creepy crawly, or the the evil monsters, or whatever is down that road that our fears might bring out, or I might get hurt down there. Something bad might happen that in this alternative timeline that I didn't take, maybe life would have been wonderful. And we pondered these things that are really interesting. So for me, a tremendous amount of the fork in the road is, and it turns its light on me and says, who are you? What are your values? What drives you? What are your non-negotiables? I was in a situation once, and I'm going to be really quite vague. It was in a work environment where I connected the dots, and I saw that down the road, I was going to be expected to do something that I believed was unethical. And that was the path. And I had a lot at stake here: career, income, mortgage, kids going off to school, that sort of thing. And I didn't sleep for 3 nights. I literally didn't sleep for 3 nights. What am I going to do? What am I going to do? And at about 2:00 on the third night, it hit me like a bolt. What you're going to do is you're going to do what you do. And whatever comes, whatever consequences, it's just going to be what it's going to be. And I went to work and I knew exactly who I was and I knew exactly what I was going to do. And that's as far down that story as I'm going to tell.
But do you know, Greg, that matches.
But it changed me.
Roy, if you can go back to the pyramid, because what you just described then, Greg, was courage.
Became courage.
You stayed open to those tough emotions. You identified what was most important to you, and that takes courage. It takes this battle that we have within ourselves sometimes, and it does cause the sleepless nights. Sometimes I think the best decisions I've made have been at that 2-3 a.m. Not after our conference parties.
It's interesting.
But I just been in my normal.
It's interesting. Dr. Travis Bradbury has 14 different things that he says have the potential to have really good people do not so good things when they're in an organization. And, just like you described, you had had to choose. You had to make a choice, and you had to have the courage. And I think that's where it stands, is when we take a stand honestly that sits with our own values and who we are. That's living life at its best. That really is. And that's whether it's work or whether it's not at work.
The ethics question is really, that is a huge fork in the road. That is something that can actually slam you quite between the eyes. Sometimes it comes up and when you least expect it. It's one of those ones that just pops out right in front of you, and you could be in the middle of a conversation, a meeting, and you're like, did I just hear what I thought I heard? Or observe what I thought I just saw?
Or am I being asked to do something? Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, or is,
the wink
did
wink.
they just do that? And it was like, and sometimes you just got to walk away. You don't have an answer straight away. Sometimes you just got to go, I'll get back to you on that one, you know,
Let me,
and
yeah.
just,
Yeah.
yeah, and just take a step back.
There
So
is
because,
some there is some tightness that we feel when we're stuck in
Yeah.
what I call self-protection bias, right? So
Yeah.
depending on the crowd that we're in, when you feel
Mhm.
that, that's your cue. That's your cue.
Yes.
It's, yeah, am I in the middle of protecting myself right now? And are my actions going to be actions that I take out of fear? And so when you find that fork in the road, you really got to tap in. And although it's touchy-feely, you really got to tap into what that's making you feel like, right?
Well, see, it's not really. This is the thing. Is it's.
I was actually going to say the same thing.
Gregory.
Yeah.
It's like, God, how many decades have we spent trying to get business to understand it's not touchy feely?
It is.
I know.
This is real
This,
performance, productivity.
yeah.
You know, hard yakka stuff that's going to happen in your business if we don't get this right.
So,
Yeah,
so to compensate,
on here.
yeah.
Right.
So to compensate for all this emotional talk, I used to have root access, administrator access on a number of Unix systems. I was root, okay?
So we don't want you having a bad day.
All my all my IT friends are going, he did that. That scares me.
I'm typing RM-R even as we speak.
No, it's /RM/ So make sure you go to the root before you delete everything. Holy cow.
Yeah.
Here's the thing that I'm thinking is that I really feel like once we come to terms with who we are and what we want to do, then the decisions of down the road start becoming clear, because we start thinking about, what do I want to do? And what I want to do isn't to be a root system administrator, have the root account on a system that's really important. At one point, that made me feel very valuable, it made me feel somewhat powerful, I had a sense of responsibility. But more importantly is, if I go down this road, whatever road that's ahead of me, and I have the opportunity to make somebody else's world better, to open up opportunities, to make somebody else pursue excellence. These are things that resonate with me. If I know who I am and what resonates with me and what I'm passionate about, touchy-feely stuff, then I know where I can make a contribution, regardless of what happens in the world, regardless of how the virus is going to change everything. And that's where, for me, the fork in the road is realizing, what is it that I truly want to do that resonates with me?
Well, see, you're talking about just moving into reset then, because that's a really cool thing. Once we're sort of on that borderline of going, hey, I kind of get this, I kind of understand what it is that is within me, or what's valuable, what values I have, as well as what is valuable, which can be two different things. But that together is what's no longer useful to me. What do I want to get rid of? What is it that actually distracts me, which takes me away from my path, it takes me away from my journey? And I like what she says here: when this is over, and it will be, and as we know from various philosophies around the world, the impermanence, this will be over. Like, we're going through another context. It will be over.
So here's
what will it become? That's the question. What will it become?
Simone, you mentioned throwing live hand grenades earlier, and that's something I've
never touched a live hand grenade. I'm just saying.
That's something I've done throughout my career.
Don't lollipop them. It's got to be like a baseball throw, right?
Yeah, right.
Open the door, throw the hand grenade in, shut the door, and run away. That's my way of getting things done sometimes.
Yeah.
But
let's create a new environment.
Just going to leave this on the table.
I've been an informal student of theoretical physics for many, many, many years. Starting as I started reading Einstein and Max Planck, and so, and there is one discipline in theoretical physics that has to do with parallel universes and multiverse and all of that.
Oh, I love that stuff.
And so when you make a decision, some would say, you create a different, you go down a path and you experience one path, but there are an infinite number of other paths as well. And so we are in the middle of an infinite number of forks in the road, each one of us making a decision we experience this, but there might be other universes in which we would be experiencing something entirely different. Whether you buy into that or not, it doesn't matter. We can't prove it, but you know,
Well,
it's a valid branch of thinking. And so, Simone, you had something to say there.
yeah, because this hits on, I mean, and you will know this name, Richard Feynman.
Oh, sure. Yep.
Yeah, exactly. And there's two particular quotes that I love from his work. And for the people that don't know it, you know, he was an American theoretical physicist doing a lot of formulation of quantum mechanics and stuff, and it's really interesting. But one of the first things he said, the first principle is that you must not fool yourself, and you are the easiest person to fool, which I love. And the second one is, as you were just talking, we've made a choice. So we've naturally changed the storyline. Our journey has already shifted the moment we make that decision. And the other thing he said was explore the world. Nearly everything is really interesting if you go into it deeply enough.
I love that. And Greg tapped into it about, you know, how he kind of took his adventure, because it was about curiosity. But there's two sides to that, right? The curiosity piece is important, but the challenging of our beliefs, the challenging of what we thought or what we believed going into it, right? So that helps us get the mind a little more open, which actually opens the door for different options and ways of approaching and attacking, you know, that journey and making those choices.
So we can make ourselves believe anything we want.
We do. We do, and I also think that we hold on to those things that we choose to conclude. I'm going to put it that way, because belief gets into a whole different realm as well. But those things that we choose to say, "Oh, that makes sense. I'm going to hold on to that." We don't challenge it. We don't revisit it, partly because we get a sense of stability out of those things that we choose to acknowledge as being true. And so this is part of, I think, the political debate. Don't want to go there, but this whole polarization is, I'm not going to change what I believe. And it doesn't matter what you say, because if I let go of this, my whole world might be imperiled here. So I'm going to hold on to this.
If I agree with you, I might be wrong.
If I agree with you, I have to concede that I was wrong, or that I was dumb, or whatever it is. And I feel like those, I'm watching those that have kind of a growth mindset, or this whole view, that are willing to go, I used to think this, and it was just kind of weird, and off we go. In other words, have more of a curiosity about it, and not say, oh my gosh, if I admit to Patty that I thought this, she's going to think I'm dumb and never talk to me again. I could end my entire career.
So my favorite question, and I want to ask Roy's philosophy around this. My favorite question is, what if?
Yeah.
So Roy, your philosophy around what if?
Yeah, what if?
Back to the fork of the road. What if?
Everybody give him the pondering chin.
Yes.
That's something that I've only recently learned to really think about very hard, is to try to imagine, because for a good portion of my life, I couldn't ask what if, because it always seemed to be the wrong choice. And either I found out it was the wrong choice later on, which means I learned something. But for the early part of my life anyway, I was told without doubt that it was the wrong choice. Whatever it was the wrong choice. And so I became convinced of that. Now, when I think about it, I say, what do I want that if to be? And how can I pursue that if and make it something real? And it's not totally a matter of chance. Through a series of accidents, all of us have wound up where we are. We talked about that earlier. We gravitated towards certain things, and we wound up doing what we're doing. And we have, achieved various things and been in various jobs over a period of time. Great. But each of us makes a decision about where we're going and what we want to do. That's the fork in the road. Is I'm going to make a decision, and I'm going to say, when I get to that town over there, I'm going to open a bar, or I'm going to build a new hotel, or I'm going to be part of a bank, whatever it happens to be. We make that to a great extent. And I think that my what if is learning to do that, and to say, I can create what I want if I believe it and I pursue it and I work toward it and I get the right materials and the right people around me. So that's my what if.
I love.
Go ahead, Patty.
I love that. That because that it's how you're asking the questions, right? It's all in how you're asking the questions. I don't ask, oh, how can I? I ask, how might I? Because that opens the door to options, right?
That's because you're Canadian, but that's another story.
But
I don't diss the Canadians. I tell you, Aussies and Canadians, they are really good pals. So just watch yourself.
You just be careful. But it is how we ask the questions. So those open-ended questions that give us options, the ones that allow us opportunity, are really important to learn to ask. And so that's where curiosity is founded, right? Is you can't be curious if you have a preset idea of where that road is leading, if it's too hard and fast.
So it seems to me that a lot of us in life, for whatever reason, kind of have this "you can't" monster over the shoulder that says, you can't do that. That's not going to work. How are you going to pay your mortgage?
Hang on.
People will think you're crazy. Yeah, that monster right there, right? And you know, you call it your parenting, call it your culture, call it whatever. But I think to a large extent, Patty, you said some really powerful words that and now I've promptly forgot whatever it was that she said, but the idea that you're asking open-ended questions, you know, how can I? How could I? I was trying to get. How can I? And Roy said something that I think is also incredibly powerful is, who do I need to partner with? Who do I need to connect with? In other words, like, let's say, not that I would ever consider doing this, but let's say I was trying to produce video content, right? And it's like, how do I learn to do that? How do I build the skills? How do I buy the equipment, versus open, because that becomes oppressive, right? Okay, then I've got this list that's going to take me 18 months. What if I partnered with somebody? What if I found some people that I could, build a relationship for mutual benefit, but also to achieve my goals? Why does it have to be about what I can do on my own?
And isn't that one of the things that we have to accomplish as leaders in a job situation, a work situation? We have to be able to say, I don't have to do everything. I shouldn't do everything. It doesn't mean I don't want to do that, I'm going to delegate that. It means that we need to partner with the right people within the organization to achieve what needs to be done.
But that's what I was going to say. I think it's very much, especially right now, it always has been a part of the leader's role, but I think especially right now is to spark that imagination, not just the curiosity, because I think curiosity comes after you've sparked the imagination. I think, helping people, when you ask that question, what if, and you don't necessarily finish the sentence, let them finish the sentence. And I think that's very, very powerful as a leader to do that. Okay, so we're in this situation. So, and you just start that musing, start that,
this is getting out of our, there is this leadership ego we can live in, saying that if I admit I don't have all the answers, then I'll look smaller, and it's actually the opposite, right?
But see, for me, people are part of this choice of the fork in the road. It's actually other people that will often provide you that pathway of want or need or travel, because they spark the idea in you to look at stuff or think about stuff. And this is exactly why we actually started chatting those eons ago, was because we don't always agree, the four of us. But
I don't agree with that. Hey, Roy, you talked about I have a very specific moment. So I became an operations manager. It doesn't matter when. I became an operations manager with a team that I was peers with, right? This was when I was network engineer doing stuff. And this is going to date it, but you remember the code red computer virus, and
Yeah,
it
sure
melted our environment, including the network, right? And I have this distinct memory. I'm doing everything in my power. I'm a manager. I manage a team, right? And so we're in this wiring closet. I've got my head in the back of the cabinet, and we're pulling subnets off, and there's a guy on the front running the router. And the most senior person, the smartest person that I've known up until, that time, literally walks in the room, and he looks at me with the most derision on his face, and he says, "What are you doing?" And I'm looking over here with 16 network cables over. I said, I'm working the issue. He goes, "You're the manager. You need to be managing." And I left there, and I went back to the command central, and there was no leadership. And there was people wearing suits who were very frustrated because millions of dollars of product was being damaged or scrapped. And I said, "All right, let's gather together over here." And I stood in front of a group of very, very frustrated people, and I started acting like I was in charge. And I developed this cadence. And what I learned was, let your technical people do the creative work in this, because they need me to do my thing. And it was a very riveting moment for me as a manager, because I wanted to be in the closet doing something that was valuable, helping, pulling the rope and getting us forward. But what they needed wasn't that. They needed me to go coordinate and be a manager.
So that goes back to something that came up earlier, and it was that whole perception in an awful lot of organizations that the interpersonal skills are not as valuable as some quote unquote hard skills. Being able to understand the network and how it operated is a hard, that hard skill. Oh, I get it. That's an IP address issue, or that's is not the same as walking into a room and acting like a leader and pulling people together. They both are equally valuable in getting the mission accomplished. And I think that's something that we maybe don't think about early enough and often enough, is that we don't necessarily have to look busy. We don't necessarily have to be turning the knobs of a particular issue. We can be thinking about it, trying to find a better way, asking the what if question, and finding valuable ways to do things that don't necessarily involve a particular skill or even contact with a technology object. So we need to rethink a lot of the ways that we react to the world around us.
Absolutely. I think that's
I'm just sort of thinking, there's almost that I always just had that feeling of, oh wow, that really lifted a lot of stuff.
Thanks, folks. I'm here all week. Tip your waitress.
No, I love that. I love it. That whole situational awareness thing of being responsive, not to the chaos, but responsive to the situation and the people around you and what the need is. I love that. Yeah.
And tying it back to Greg's situation there, I found myself working in an organization of a couple of thousand people, and we were hit very specifically. We were targeted for a 0-day attack. Nobody had seen it before. And we had a plan. We had a team. We had to, we knew where all the pizza places were in town. We knew it was Friday night at 5:00. We knew who was out there drinking beer in the pizza place. We found them, brought them back in. 5:00 on a Friday night is exactly when this hit, and it was done deliberately, of course.
Yes.
But we had the plan. We executed the plan, and I was very happy, because my job in all of this was to be the communication hub. And does that fit, or does that fit?
That fits.
I was the hub, and it was the perfect place for me to be. And that job was as valuable as anybody who was out there in the field pulling cables or finding out which computers were infected, whatever it happened to be. So, well, we're coming right up to the top of the hour. And this, as always, has been a fascinating discussion. If you've catch this on YouTube, either of you've been listening in live, or if you listen to it back, let's go around and just say our names and raise our hands. Greg.
Yep, I'm Greg.
Patty.
Oh, I was supposed to say my name.
Simon.
And I'm Barbarang, and I'll be back here next week. Thanks for checking out KTLO. Keep the learning on. And,
Jazz hand.
We'll,
Jazz hands. She wants to do jazz hands.
this is not jazz hands, folks. This is
Yeah.
jazz hands. Okay.
Yeah.
See you next time. Thank you.